Good evening, and thank you for joining us for our LodgeMaster webinar, New BSA Sync Capabilities in LodgeMaster. Tonight's webinar is scheduled for 60 minutes. We'll spend 30 minutes on the demo and wrap up with 30 minutes of question and answers. If you have a question this evening, if you could please drop it in the Zoom chat. Along the bottom or top of your screen in the Zoom toolbar, there is a Q&A button. If you click that, you'll be able to submit a question to our team of moderators, and we'll do our best to answer those as we're going along if they're pertinent to the content being shared, or at the end, we'll spend about 30 minutes answering questions. Please don't use the chat to submit those questions, as we're not able to prioritize the questions when they come through chat, and we want to ensure that we do not miss anybody's questions. So if you could, please use that Q&A button in your Zoom toolbar. Everyone is muted tonight, so the only way you will be able to ask a question is by using that Q&A button. The slides from tonight, as well as the recording, will be made available to everyone who registered approximately 24 hours after we conclude. With that, we will jump into the demo portion of our webinar this evening. All right, so jumping into it, when we hop into users, there's a new user permission for all admins. You'll need to go in and assign this user permission. We added it. You'll see this show up when we send out the email with the documentation. Down here, there's new permission, unit BSA data sync. So as a Lodge admin, if you're not a Lodge admin, you'll need to ask your Lodge admin to enable this. If you are a Lodge admin, we have this right here, and you'll need to enable that permission for yourself and any other user that'll need to use the BSA sync tools. When we hop into units, you'll notice once that permission is enabled, we have a new tool at the top of our menu. Under Tools, we have Export BSA Unit ID Match, Import BSA Unit ID, and BSA Unit Data Sync. These tools, they only show up if you have that permission enabled. So you will need to do that right away. Anybody who needs access to that. If you don't have access, this tools menu is not there. So the first step to perform sync with the BSA system is we need to match our units in LodgeMaster to the unit in the BSA system. And the way we're going to do that is with a GUID that's unique to that unit in the BSA system. To start, we'll export the BSA ID unit matching data. You'll get a message indicating what's going to happen and a warning that this may take a while to retrieve and analyze the data from the BSA system. Click yes to start the download, and be patient while that download takes place. We do go out to the BSA system and pull that data in live. So depending on the size of the council database and how many units and other users that are using the BSA system, there could be a little bit of delay. But if you're patient, it will download. You can see my file is downloaded, and what we get out is a file that contains 2 sheets. Sheet 1, the OLM data. This contains all the unit data from the unit database in your LodgeMaster database. Any data that you have there as far as the designator, the city, state, county, and the charter organization, we export all of that out, and you'll see 2 blank columns at the beginning of sheet 1. Update BSA unit GUID, and update inactive. The data from that comes from sheet 2, BSA data. In this sheet, this contains all of the units, active units, in your council's BSA management system, as well as the respective GUID. Not every unit in your council, you may export this and notice that a unit is missing. That could be for a number of reasons. Their recharter's hung up for signatures, or it's missing payment, or the new BSA background check form that has to be filled out for every adult. If that's missing, the charter doesn't get processed, or if the council just has a backlog of processing charters, councils can use a shared membership services at the national office, where they send paperwork to the national office to be processed. And they sometimes, there's a delay in getting that paperwork processed. So if you export this and you're missing a unit that you know is a unit, perhaps you're a member of, check with your council registrar first and see why that unit may not be showing up on the list. It may just be, like I said, the paperwork's missing, some type of payment, they're waiting on a signature. There's a number of reasons why they may not show up here. It doesn't mean that they're not, they didn't recharter or that they're not going to. It could, but just know that there may be a legitimate reason why they're not on this whether or not on this list of units that we export. So the process is very straightforward. We need to take the BSA unit GUID from sheet 2 and insert into the update BSA unit GUID column in sheet 1. There are a number of ways you can do this. You can manually match it up. If you are, if you're an Excel wizard, you can write a function to look those up, or if you know somebody who's really good with Excel and databases, they could write you a function to do some matching based on unit number and district, some combination of factors there. Or the LodgeMaster team, we are not providing any template or any means to do this. It is up to each individual lodge how you do the match. What it looks like when you get done is you'll have a file that looks like this. So we have the update BSA unit GUID filled in with the corresponding, we pulled these from sheet 2, and we have the OLM unit ID here. There is a third column here, update inactive. What this will do is if this is a true false, if it's set to true, it will mark that unit as inactive in LodgeMaster when we push this data back in. We would advise that you do not mark any unit as inactive the first or second time, or even the third or fourth time through this. We would recommend that you mark them as inactive when you've confirmed with your council's registrar that that unit is inactive, they're not rechartering, they've merged, something, for some reason they're not going to be considered an active unit. Right now I know many councils still have charters outstanding and processing. And so the first time through, we would advise that you leave the update inactive, blank, unless you know for sure with 100% certainty that that unit's inactive and not going to have a match in the future. You could go ahead and mark a true false as if they're inactive, but our recommendation is to run this a few times and make sure that the council has processed all their recharters and that you have a concise list of units in your database that are not going to be active. A tip while doing this is to first remove your duplicates from your LodgeMaster database. You can see in here, we don't have any duplicate troops. If we had 2 PAC 167s in our LodgeMaster database, you would see that on here twice. Now there's a easy way to fix that. We have a merge function within LodgeMaster, and so the first thing that the LodgeMaster team would, advise that someone do would be to clean up that list of units in your LodgeMaster database. We know there's a lot of duplicates out there, but luckily we have an easy way to fix that. So if you do have duplicates, you can see here we have 2 Crew 7s. If I exported this right now, Crew 7 would be in there twice, but they're only in the BSA system once. What we can do is if we right click, we can merge. We're going to merge into Crew 7. That's the duplicate. I'm going to choose to delete Crew 7, the duplicate, after I do the merge, because we don't want that unit sticking around after we do the merge, otherwise it's still going to be there. I'm going to hit merge. That unit is now gone. Crew 7 is only in here once. When I look at my data match file, it's only going to be in here once. So at this point, we've done all of our matching. We've removed all the duplicates that we may have in LodgeMaster. We are ready to now take this data, these 3 columns. This is all that's required. So from our sheet, where we have here, you can see we have several columns. The only 3 columns that we need is update BSA unit GUID, update inactive, and the OLM unit ID. We take that in our file like this, and we're ready to import this to our LodgeMaster database. So we're going to go to Tools, Import BSA Unit IDs. We will select our import file. I have that open.
Chad, while you're closing that, we did have a question. You don't need to remove
upload.
The other.
This is a standard upload function throughout LodgeMaster. You can see it auto matches our column in the file to where it needs to go. If for some reason you name the columns different, you can match them up. Same functionality as importing members or importing any type of data, same screen. We're going to start our import. You can see there we saved 204 records, 204 unit BSA GUIDs to LodgeMaster. If we had any errors, they're output here in the results window. you can copy those out into a text editor. There is no way to save it in LodgeMaster though. So if you do have errors, you will need to copy the results to a text editor or some word processing application to look at it, because we do not save that in LodgeMaster. It's a one-time thing only on this screen. I'm going to hit finish. At this point, our BSA GUID has been loaded into LodgeMaster. Now, we do have a way for you to view which GUIDs have been loaded. We have a new column by opening the column chooser called BSA Unit Link. If I add this column, you'll see here a yes, no, if this crew has been linked. If it's a yes, that means the GUID has been added and we are linked, the unit in LodgeMaster is linked to the unit in the BSA system. A no indicates that that link has not been made, the GUID is missing, and you will need to add that. To add GUIDs later, to add the unit IDs, you export the unit ID match data, you export it, it'll export. This time when I export, it's going to look a little bit different. When I open this up now, because I've done the match first or one time through, you can see this BSA unit GUID or the unit ID is now present in this file for any unit that we matched previously. So I run this, on Friday, I run this, and then next Friday I run it again. And you can fill in then any unit ID, the GUID that was not filled in previously, because maybe crew 63 this week when I run it, they're in the BSA data. They weren't last week, but this week the council got their paperwork processed, national signed off on it, and they're now an active unit. We would go into this file, we'd put the GUID in, we would save this and do the upload process the exact same way that we did previously. You can run this as many times as you want. We encourage you to run this weekly, monthly, because the data is going to change as the BSA gets those units, gets their rechartering processed, and everything taken care of there. So at this point, we are ready to actually do the sync. At this point, the only thing we've done is added a unit ID from the BSA system to LodgeMaster. We've not changed any other data. Now comes where we're actually going to do a sync between LodgeMaster and the BSA system. The final step, step 3, we call it a 3-step process. Step 1 is the export, 2 is import. We're at step 3, the actual unit data sync. When I open this up, this dialog has many options on it, but it may look confusing, it may look like there's a lot there, but it's very simple to use. We have extensive documentation on this that we'll share with everyone, but please take your time and read all the options. Don't just jump in here and click start right away. It wouldn't do anything because we do default test mode, but just please, read through the documentation and read each option carefully, and then only enable those options that you actually want to run. So we're gonna tonight explain what each of these do, and then we're actually gonna run this. So the sync basic unit data for all linked units. So the basic data includes the district, the unit number, the unit designation, and the charter organization name. As part of the sync, that data is going to be pulled into LodgeMaster from the BSA system. If the unit type or unit number in LodgeMaster is different than the unit number in the BSA system, the unit type and unit number will automatically be changed. We won't automatically change it in your database. It'll show in a results window. So we'll show that tonight. But if the unit type and unit number is different than what's in the BSA system, we will not automatically change anything. We're not going to do any updates. We're just going to tell you what's different, and you're going to manually need to do that update. If the unit designation, the boy troop, girl troop, is missing, it will be updated or inserted to LodgeMaster to match the BSA system. The same with the district. We will update or add the district to match the BSA system. If the district name is missing in your database in LodgeMaster, we will add that for you. So if there's something in the BSA system, a district that's not in LodgeMaster, we add that for you. And the final thing, the charter rep, we add that to match the BSA system. So the only thing we don't change is the unit type and unit number. If there is a difference there on a linked, you will need to deal with that on your own and what we call the manual handling. There's a couple of things where you have to manually take some actions, and we'll point those out. But the unit type and the unit number being different is one of those where you'll have to take action as an admin. The next option, to sync key 3 data for all linked units. This is a big one. So what we bring over is the Scoutmaster and Committee Chair. So it says key 3, but we are not bringing over the charter organization rep. That's not synced. So what happens with those key 3 contacts? There's some conditions. So if there's no key 3 contacts, key 2, in our case, the Scoutmaster and the Committee Chair, but if they're not present on the unit in LodgeMaster, we will add that. It'll be a simple non-member contact added to the unit, added to your LodgeMaster database. That's if they do not exist. Now, if it's a non-member contact, the sync will first attempt to match by full name and BSA ID. If it's not a match, the sync replaces the data with the contact that's in the BSA system. That's if it's not a match. If it's a non-member contact and our sync runs and it's matched with full name and BSA ID, the sync will update the BSA ID and the email address to match the contact from the BSA system. That's non-members. You have a non-member added to the unit. Now, if you have a member, being an airman in your lodge is linked to that unit as a Scoutmaster or Committee Chair, we again match by full name and BSA ID. If differences are found, they are highlighted in the results window as a manual action needs to take place. Same with if the unit type or unit number is different, it's a manual action that needs to take place by you as the admin running this tool. It shows you we found a match. John Scout is the Scoutmaster, but there's some piece of data that's different. Here's what you need to do. They maybe have a different email or something. Whatever that is, it'll show you that in the output. There's an output window. One important thing that we want to make very clear to everyone, the sync process for key 3 will not make changes to member records. Actual member records will stay the same. If it's a member in the sync and it matches, it just shows you what needs to be changed. We do not alter any member records. Phone numbers, I didn't mention phone numbers. That's because they're not available in the sync. We're not able to pull those over, only email addresses. Moving on down, add all BSA units that are not linked with a LodgeMaster unit. Now, what this means is all units from the BSA system that are not linked will be created. So, you know, we don't recommend running this option right away because it'll result in duplicate units. So we would advise running this after you've done the match several times and you have several, you have as many units linked up as possible. You've potentially deactivated some inactive, LodgeMaster units that you had or that are no longer. But if you enable this option to add all BSA units that are not linked with a LodgeMaster unit, you potentially are going to end up with quite a few duplicates because anything that match, it's going to create a unit in your LodgeMaster database for that. And you'll need to manually take care of those duplicates. So again, we don't advise running this until the matching has been fully completed to avoid duplicates. Moving on down, deactivate linked units that are not active BSA units. What this is going to do, any unit that's linked, so you've added the ID, if it's inactive in the BSA system, it's going to mark it as inactive in LodgeMaster. As with the third option, we do not recommend running this until you've verified with your council registrar that all the units rechartering paperwork is done. If they still have several outstanding recharters, you're going to deactivate a bunch of units that you didn't intend to deactivate or mark them as inactive. When you try to do the match in the future, they're not going to be in your LodgeMaster list. You're going to have to go change their inactive status, or you're going to end up with duplicates. If you run this add all BSA units, the combination of them, could result in duplicates or units marked inactive. So again, highly recommended not to run this deactivate linked units that are not active in BSA units until you've done all your matching, you've met with, you've contacted your council registrar and can confirm that the unit list you're getting is correct from the council. The last option, deactivate all LodgeMaster units that are not linked with a BSA unit. As it suggests, any unit that's not linked to a BSA unit will be deactivated regardless of the status in the BSA system. So if you've not matched them, say they're active in the BSA system, this is going to mark them as inactive and deactivate them in LodgeMaster, no matter what the BSA system says. As with the other options, this should not only be run after all the charges are in process and you verified with your council registrar that the list you're getting back is correct. And that you've done your matching. Running any of these three options prematurely and early before you've done your due diligence on matching and verifying that the recharting process for the council is complete, it's going to result in data that result in duplicate units or units marked as inactive that you're going to have to reactivate. Anything like that, running these options too early is going to result in that. We highly recommend running the Sync BSA unit, running the first two options first, get some of that data brought over before running these other options. And we want to stress the importance of reading these and running only with the options you need, because the changes are permanent. We can't undo these. So once you start this process, whatever's checked, that's going to happen to your LodgeMaster data. If you have a lot of units, hundreds of units, 200-300 units or more, you'd have a lot of potential manual cleanup. Some things are going to be very hard to clean up manually. So please read these options carefully and select only that you want to run. The final checkbox that's checked by default here is run in test mode only. We default this checkbox for a reason, because we don't want you inadvertently running some sync process against your data. This run in test mode only is going to show us exactly what changes are going to happen. It's not going to make any changes, but it's going to show us what's going to happen. So I'm going to run that now in test mode so I can show you, we can see what's going to happen with the sync basic unit data for our units. So we're going to run that. Again, you get a confirmation with which options are checked. Please review this, make sure it's the options you want, because changes are final, and click yes. This is now going to run out to it's going to run against the BSA system. And you can see here exactly what changes are going to be made to our LodgeMaster data if we were not to have the test option enabled. This does take a little bit. Please be patient. It does pull back a lot of data that we have to process through. And so you can see this is running through exactly what changes. You can copy this out of here. This is copyable, so you can copy this out to your text editor, to a word processing application, and save this to look at later. As we're going to let this go, let this run. It will take a few minutes to run, but it is going, as you can see. Mike, while that's running, do we have any questions that are relevant to what we're talking about that we want to address while this is running?
Yes, and we just had one point of clarification that somebody brought up. We use the term in the matching that you showed earlier, the BSA unit GUID.
I'll take that as no. I don't. Mike, if you're on, I think you may be muted.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Mike, we can hear you. Chad, for some reason, can't.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that, everyone. Mike, I can hear you now.
That. Okay, sorry about that. So we did have a question just clarifying that when you do the matching, it's we use the term BSA unit GUID. GUID is just a term for a unique identifier for units, and that's what the BSA uses to uniquely identify each unit in their system. There wasn't some shorter numerical key we could use, unfortunately. So we used that to be able to do the matching. So it may look like an imposing long character string, but it's simply just a unique identifier for each of the units in the BSA system. So that's how we're doing that matching.
Perfect. All right. I'm going to hop back to the demo. We'll get to the other questions later. You can see that this it completed test mode, no change of state, but here are all the changes that are going to happen. I can see, as you can see, I can select this and copy this out into a notepad or some type of word processing to save this so you can see what's going to happen. We highly recommend reviewing this as it's going to indicate exactly what changes are going to be made. And if there's something in here that you don't agree with, this is the time to look at that and sort that out, because once you run the sync, you can't undo it. So in our case, this all looks good. I'm going to close that, and we're gonna run this for real here. So we're going to sync the BSA unit data. We're not going to run it in test mode. So we'll sync. Yeah, we'll start with this. We'll start the sync. Again, it's confirming. This time it doesn't have the option, the mention of test, because we're running this for real. It's going to start making actual data changes. Now, this process also takes a few minutes to complete due to the amount of data and the transactions we have to do. But you can see the sync has started. You can see here exactly what changes are being made. It's writing these in real time to your database. You'll see it pause. You'll see it stop. We are doing some batching here. So if you do see it slow down, just know it's saving those changes, but it is running. It will take a few minutes though, so please be patient and let that run. And you can watch it there, what changes it's going to make, just like if we're running this in a test mode.
So while that's running, we can take a couple questions, I think. So one we had from Ken was, as a co-chapter advisor with only access to a chapter, is this tool something that they can do, or is it just at the lodge level?
Great question. So this is a lodge level only tool. Due to the nature of the data being changed and the implications of running it and just the complexity behind it, it is a lodge level tool only.
We had a question from Mark that he's the registrar for their lodge and he's not able to see this tool.
Yeah, so right now no one can see this tool. We actually have not enabled this tool. We'll be doing that tomorrow. So after this webinar, we'll get the recording all published up there. We do have documentation that we'll publish, extensive documentation on this, and it will be emailed out tomorrow sometime. Once you get that email, you'll be able to go in and enable this tool like we did at the beginning of the webinar. So right now, you won't see this tool, but tomorrow when you get the email from us saying that this new feature is available, you can then go into users and assign this, enable this permission on your account, and you'll be able to see this tool. And it looks like our sync, so we'll get to the other questions later, but our sync did finish. So again, I can copy this out to a word processing or text editor and see every change that was made. So I'm going to close this, and the screen's going to refresh, and you can see our data is now, all the BSA data has been moved over. If I manage this linked unit, you'll see that our data has been brought over. All the charter org information is there. That was all synced. At this point, we can run this again to sync key 3 data. You could do, together. We're going to do it here. I'm not going to show the test mode, but the output, I will highlight some things in the output of running this in real time here. But at this point, yeah, I'm doing them separate so I can I want to point out a couple of things. So we're going to sync that contact data. So I'm going to start this and we're going to run this and we'll point out a couple things, those manual changes. We'll try to catch one here when it finishes of manual changes we need to make. Mike, do we have any other
While that's running, do we want to do some questions?
Yeah,
we had one for the matching. For the update inactive field, what values can you put in that? And so the answer is you can put true, false, you can put yes, no, it can be capital or lowercase, it's not specific, it'll check for any value in that field. That comes along the line of a true, false, yes, no. We had a question on the Excel file. You showed a file that you imported that just had the 3 columns, but we had a question whether you could use a file that has all the columns in it.
You could. With that, you'll just have to make sure it'll match the 3 columns that are required: the ID or GUID column, the inactive and the OLM unit ID. The others you'll see in there, but they won't match up. They're not required, but you can import that file. You do not have to clear those out like we did.
Great. Andy asked if the BSA unit shows up on an export and it's not already in OALM, do we have to add it manually?
You do not. There is an option to add that. I guess it's a two-part answer. You can, and you can add the link, or you can run there's an option to add all BSA units that are not linked to the LodgeMaster unit. You can do that, but that's going to bring all of them over. So if it's just one or two, yes, we would advise going into LodgeMaster and creating that and then adding the link. If you run the option to add all units that are not linked, you could have unintended results there.
Okay, great. We had a question from Chris. So after doing this regularly over the year, the squid will be the same year after year, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So, and sort of to answer the second part of his question, you'd really only be looking to add new units that feed over from the BSA system after that first year, and you've got everything linked and syncing. We had a very common question that's come in. What happens if you have two troop 10s that both existed because of a merger or something else? Can you still do this matching and syncing?
So that you have two troop 10s in your LodgeMaster database, I assume?
In the same district.
In the same district. You can merge them in LodgeMaster with the merge function if they're the same. If you have two troop 10s.
If they are supposed to be the same unit, and then I'll add if it really is two units that exist in the same district because of a merger of districts or councils, that's the reason specifically that we let you do that initial matching manually yourself. So you can match up the correct unit from the BSA system based on charter.org or other information. You can do that matching manually, and then you can continue to have two troop 10s in the same district and use this syncing process to correctly sync the data for those units. It doesn't matter from our perspective how many of the same unit number, even with the same designation, that exist in the same district. As long as you do that matching yourself and correctly tie those two together, it'll work correctly from there on.
Thank you, Mike, for clarifying. I misunderstood the question. I appreciate you. Thanks for clearing that up.
So we had a question, it looks like it's almost done, but we had a question about if a update finds a contact from the BSA who is a member matched by BSA ID, will it match to the member or will it create a non-member record for the unit?
So we do match on BSA ID as part of the sync. If there's differences in the contact information, it shows in the output window.
And to add to that, if it will not look through your member records to find a member with that BSA ID or name and link it to them, it will just create a non-member contact for them. We're not necessarily, through this process and allowing you to keep this data updated, we're encouraging you to use the non-member contacts for units and just let the data automatically be updated via this sync and not worry about tying it to members.
I think this is probably, maybe we have time for one more, and I think this will be
sure.
about finished.
So there was a question, we only have a handful of girl troops, and the rest are just listed without the designation. Is it going to create a new record or update that designation on the record?
It will update the designation. So if you have Troop 80 in LodgeMaster without a designation, and the council export has a Troop 80 and it's marked as a boy troop, and you put that ID in and do the sync, it will update the designation to match whatever it should be from the BSA system, whatever that unit is chartered as.
And to sort of follow up on that, we had a question from David. Can you add an alpha character after for girl and boy troops? You can't add a random character of your own choosing, but there are some specifically defined BSA ones, BT for boy troop, GT for girl troop, and then for packs, there's boy packs, family packs, and girl packs. Looks like it's still running, so we have time for one more question. If a unit's deactivated, how does that impact member records?
So the impact, it won't, it'll still be on the member record. If I'm in troop 80 and I deactivate troop 80, I go to my member record. It's still going to show troop 80, but if I click in the drop down, troop 80 is not going to be there.
Let's see. So we did have a question from David. He assumes that we have to do this every year. We'd encourage you to do it throughout the year and let that data update. And if unit leaders change, let the sync pull those in so that when you're using LodgeMaster and the unit data to do contacts with units, you always have the most up-to-date data.
And there's no limit. I'll just, you can run this as often as you want. Once we enable this, that you can do the export and the import to keep those updated as often as you'd like.
We did have a question about district or councils, the district or council units. So you're welcome to keep those in. We just suggest you don't run the disable or deactivate non-linked units option because it will deactivate those at the end. But if you don't run that option, you're welcome to keep that council unit or district units in your database and continue using those as you are. You don't necessarily need to, and those don't necessarily need to be in there, but you are welcome to do that.
Do you have some other questions while this is running, Mike?
Sure. So we had one from Dan. Can we do things like email troop and crew leaders using OALM filters and stuff? There's not a direct email functionality currently from the unit grid, but you can use the grid data and export and build email lists to do whatever emailing you need to. It's certainly something we could look at for the future, adding the ability to do emailing based on your filters in the unit grid. Let's see, we had a couple more questions come in. Oh, we did have a question that he sees a lot of packs in the demo. Will it by default create packs? So it is, the sync is creating all of the units that exist in your council so that you can link members who are elected to them. We're not only syncing troops and crews and ships, so it will sync all of your units in. That's a great question.
And it will, unless you have that option checked, we don't sync those in. So remember, you do have to have the option checked to do that. We by default won't just import and create units.
We did have a great question from Bob Hetrick about if it creates a non-member record, can we turn it into a member record later if the adult gets nominated? We'd actually, again, encourage you to just use non-member contacts for the units going forward instead of tying them to members. That way, as unit leaders update, you don't have to worry about replacing linked members and stuff. You can just let the sync pull in those new unit leaders as they change. And not have to worry about manually maintaining those going forward. And we did have a great question from Ben about, and we've had a couple questions similar about pulling in key 3 phone numbers in the future. It's certainly something we'd love to do. It's just something not available currently in what we have access to in the BSA API data. So it's something we can work with them on in the future, but we wanted to get this released to everybody. And then you can always put in phone numbers for unit leaders as you collect them or through whatever method you'd like to. It's just something we don't have access to right now, but we can certainly continue working with them and looking for that for the future. And as soon as they add it, we can easily add it to our sync process. So we did have I'd say a tricky question from Alex. If they see one thing wrong in the sync when they run it in test mode, is there a way to not update that one thing? There isn't, unfortunately, a way to do that. You run the process and let it do the syncing. You would need to contact your council and have something corrected from their perspective to make sure it syncs going forward through the process correctly. So we did have a question from Matt about, since we're bringing all these packs and other things over, does that affect unit election percentages and all of those things? All of the percentages that we use for order the arrow calculations, like unit election percentage and things like that, are use the specific unit types appropriate. So we look just for troops and crews and ships to do those calculations. So you won't have to worry about, even though those packs have been added, they're not affecting your election numbers or anything like that.
Excellent. All right, it does look like so we'll put the pause on those questions, but we will come back to them. But in here, you can see all the results of our, this was adding key 3 data. So I can highlight this, but you can see for this pack, we placed the committee chairman with, said scouter, and you can scroll through and see what exact changes were made. I don't see one in here. I was hoping to point one out, but what you'll see is if there's some manual work that needs to be done. There's a pull this over here. You will see. Look for, there's it says update manually, and then it has the exact change that needs to be made. You can look for that. We do have a screenshot here. You can see in our documentation what that's doing, and then down here what we tell you to look for is that update manually. That's for those cases where we don't do the auto update for whatever reason, whatever piece of data that is. There are those circumstances where we don't make changes, and so just look for that update manually, and then you can go make those. But again, you can select this and copy it out. So at this point, if we hop into a unit, you can see all of our basic data. The contact information is there. It's all on the grid. Somebody asked about sending email to some type of to a unit leader. We do have the unit leader email, the fields here in the column chooser where you can add the contact information for whatever position you're looking for, like the committee chair email. You can add that field there so that you could send an email in some other external system to all those contacts. I think that was a question. At this point, excuse me, at this point, our unit sync is complete. The LodgeMaster system and the BSA system are working together. That data has been pulled into LodgeMaster, and you can run this, as we said several times tonight. Run this often, do your matching. We encourage you to run this often and keep this data up to date. We mentioned not using members for the unit contacts. While you can do that, it's our recommendation and best practice that you start using non-members. That way, every time you run this sync, it can update that data and it'll always be accurate. If I run this again, we'll see what happens. But if there are any changes, if there's a change in the BSA system from the last time you ran this, it'll be able to update that, and you'll always have the most current data in LodgeMaster, which is what we want. We want lodges to be able to have that up-to-date unit contact information. So you can run this, and by having it as non-members, it's able to update that data on its own. The sync tool is able to do that. And you can run this, as we said many times, run it as many times as you'd like to update that data. If there's no changes, it'll tell you that, and you'll be able to see. We'll see here pretty quick that there shouldn't be any changes between the BSA system and LodgeMaster for those units that we brought in. With that, Mike, do we have any other questions that we want to hit while or talk about while we're on these screens?
So we did have a one that just came up. What if the information is more up to date in the OA system and LodgeMaster than in the BSA system? And we'd encourage you to provide that data to your council so the registrar can update it in ScoutNet, and then it would feed over correctly. The BSA system would always be for unit contact data. The BSA system will be assumed to be the accurate source for that.
Yes. I do want to highlight quick, we are coming up on the top of the hour. We kind of mixed in the questions. I think it worked. We kind of mixed in those questions along. I think that worked well tonight while we let that sync run. But I do just want to highlight in test mode only, even the LodgeMaster team in our test system here, we are doing this in test mode only, but I'm gonna enable the option to add all BSA units that are not linked, and then I think we'll add deactivate units that are not linked. And I just show you the output. We're again test mode only, even our own data here. And let that we'll let that go. That may take a little bit. So while that's running, I think we could take questions for about another 10 minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. Mike, if we have questions.
Sure, they're flowing in fast and furious as I can read them.
My Zoom toolbar is flashing a lot here, so.
So a question, let's see. Let's see, will the sync remove leaders that are no longer in a unit, or do we have to do it manually? Justin, so if a new leader presents itself from the BSA side, it will replace any non-member contacts that you have on a unit record. Will this process update member records to new units? So if a member changes units, will it be able to update the member? So we're not, Anthony, this process doesn't affect members at all. We're not doing anything that changes members or what units they're connected to. This is literally just to pull in updated unit information for, so that your lodge has that information accurately to be able to do elections and other connections with units.
I will jump in quick. You can see here where we ran that option. You can see here, pack 124 family pack was not linked with the BSA unit and will be deactivated. This was in test mode, so we didn't actually deactivate anything. But if we ran this live, there's an example of what would happen. Here we added troop 710, a girl troop. It would be added. So it's just a sample of the output. You can copy this and put that in a text editor or something and review those results. But that's what will happen if you run some of those other options. I do see
just a real quick question that people had. So you referred to it as the output window. It is the results list that Chad's been showing. That's what he's referring to as the output window, is where it says results.
I do see some hands being raised in Zoom. If you have questions, if you could put those in the Q&A for us, please. We're not able to unmute anybody on this. So if you have a question, if you could put it in the Q&A, we can answer them that way. Any that we don't get to tonight, we will follow up with an email. But the raising hands, unfortunately, we won't be able to take your question that way. But we do have about 7 more minutes here, Mike. If we want to continue the questions, I'll forgo our closing slides here in the sake of questions. I will throw them up, but we will continue to take questions if we want to keep going through, because I do see they are rolling in.
So we did have a question. The question was, if you add a non-unit contact and it has the BSA ID, can they add a separate member record with the BSA ID? Yes, it's the duplicate checking for members is only looking at other member records. It's not paying attention to the non-unit contact. So you would be able to add a separate member record with that BSA ID. Will the update include unit leader emails to make it easier to contact? So yes, that's the primary thing that we're pulling in, is all the updated unit contacts and their email addresses. So I did have a question from Daryl about pulling in unit commissioners as well. As far as I know, Daryl, that's not something that's available, at least anywhere that we have access to in the BSA data that we can sync. So it's something we won't be able to pull in at this time. The unit records don't come across with unit commissioners, so I'm not sure if that's stored somewhere else in the BSA systems, but it's not something that we have available or visible to us. We did have a question. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was gonna, again, if you were not, just a point of clarification, again, it does not touch member data. I know we mentioned at the beginning, but if anybody has joined us since, to maybe answer any questions that are out there, this is not updating member data. It's only unit data.
Let's see. So Sean asked if there was an end of sync message. That you will see the top bar will turn green when the sync finishes, and it'll say that sync is completed at that point. So you'll see a message. You may not have seen it when Chad was showing it quickly, but there is a clear message when it's complete and the top bar turns green that you're good to go at that point. So this is a question that's come up a couple times. If you have synced a unit contact and then you added a phone number and run the sync again, will it remove that phone number? No, it will leave that phone number as many times as you run the sync again. It'll only remove the phone number and other information you added about that leader, like an address or something like that, if it replaces it with a completely new person. So it got a new name and BSA ID. That's the only point that it would remove data.
There's a question at what time, somebody asked when this data is pulled from the BSA system into LodgeMaster. It's happening in real time. So when you click that sync, it's going out to the BSA system and doing it in real time. So that data is as current as possible in the BSA system.
So we did have a couple questions about deactivating units. You can always go into the inactive unit screen and reactivate those if they've shown up as they've become active again from a BSA side. You can reactivate it before you run the sync and let it continue pulling that data for that reactivated unit. So you don't need to let it add a new one. You can always reactivate if you would like to.
And I'll show that quick as maybe we're answering another question, but here you can see that complete message at the top that sync is complete. And these are the results for the output window, as I was calling it. The inactive units, this is not a new feature. Here's the inactive, and we can reactivate or restore a unit, and they are now active again if you do manage to deactivate or mark one as inactive that you need.
So we did have a couple other interesting questions. One was if you are we recommending that you remove linked members and let it do non-member contacts? It is very well completely up to you. It's something we're recommending just so that the sync can always pull in new leaders. You don't need to, though. If you want to leave them linked to members and use it that way, you're completely welcome to at this time. We did have a question about inactive and active and why not just leave all the units active. You'll see later this year as we roll out more induction tools that it's going to use the unit list, and having an accurate unit list with the correct number of units in it will make doing things like elections and calculating all of those percentages and seeing how you're doing much more accurate and easier. So that's why we've started building all these tools and letting you cull down your unit list so that you have an accurate active unit list available.
I think we have time for a few more questions if we have any.
Sure. So we had one, and non-member contacts is relatively new. So we had one, is non-member contact data only tied to the unit and not editable elsewhere outside the unit module?
Yes. As Mike mentioned, the non-member is a new feature, and that data is not anywhere else in LodgeMaster. It's specific to that unit. We do have that feature in events as well to add non-member event attendees. Same there, that data is only editable on that event. There's no master non-member list.
So we did have a couple sort of related questions. One is about, does what's showing in the grid relate to what will be synced from the unit sync? No, it's syncing all units. It's not what's specifically showing currently in the grid. We did have a question about things to come. So we had a question about member portal and things in the future. We'll have lots of news about that at NOAC this summer. So stay tuned for announcements about future projects and member portals and stuff at NOAC this summer.
All right, so we are coming up on the top of the hour, so I do have just a couple little last things. Maybe depending on if there's some questions, the team will stick around for a few minutes, but I do want to be respectful of people's time, so I am going to show a couple slides, some resources. Real quick, and then it will stay around for a little bit to do questions. But we do encourage you to get involved in our user group. We have a feature upvote site where you can suggest features, and the LodgeMaster team will look at those and work to implement them into the program. So we encourage you to check that out. We are active on all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We post stuff there. All of our training recordings are on our YouTube page. And slight ask from everyone: we are looking for some subscribers on our YouTube page to be able to enable some advanced features on there. So if you're not following us on YouTube and subscribe, if you could do that, we'd appreciate it. And the last thing I'll leave everyone with is support. So visit our documentation on lodgemaster-support.oa-bsa.org. You can also email us for support if you can't find the help you need in the documentation, support@lodgemaster.oa-bsa.org. Please don't email a team member individually or message us on Facebook or Twitter. We can't provide support that way due to the nature of the data that we store, and we just need to be able to track those with a proper support ticket. So please email us. We're more than happy to answer your questions and help, but we do need that to be an email, please, or log it in the support center. You can log in. And last is our system status page, status.oa-bsa.org. Check that out. It shows when we're going to be doing maintenance, if something's down, if we have some issue. We strive for the best possible uptime and no issues impacting you, but from time to time we do have to do maintenance. Check that out, that's where you can find that. We appreciate everybody joining us tonight. We hope that everyone is staying healthy and staying safe during these times. So with that, again, thank you. We'll cut the webinar here, but if there are some questions, I think we'll stick around for a few minutes and maybe do some more questions. So you're welcome to drop off. Thank you again. But if you want to hang around, we will answer some questions. Mike, if we have any last ones?
No, I think we're pretty much up to date at this point. So we really encourage you to come see us if we're able to see you at NOAC this summer and come to the training classes, and look for more information online about upcoming future trainings and future enhancements to the system. We got a lot of exciting things planned for everybody.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.